Oh, this Netflix series, what is going to be in it? This is about...
Do you want me to be nice, Jeremy?
Well, yes, of course. Yeah, go on. So Harry and Meghan are going to have a show on Netflix, and it turns out they've already recorded a lot of it.
Well, look, all I'm going to say about this is Harry and Meghan, when they said they were leaving the UK and quitting the royal family, were all about privacy and protecting their young child. Now it turns out, according to this quite extraordinary report, that during all of these historic times, the Sandringham Summit, when Archie was born, their big split from the royal family, they were actually secretly recording their own footage, which helped them secure this mega bucks deal with Netflix. And it adds in to this narrative, which, as you know, Jeremy, I've reported for the past 18 months, and it is just reporting. I don't really have a strong opinion on it, but people within the royal family do, which is that Meghan, while she was a serving duchess and the British royal family being paid for by taxpayers, was on the side negotiating deals with Hollywood power players. And I think regardless of what we think of the royal family and wherever you stand on it, it's quite inappropriate for a duchess, for a princess, for someone paid for by us, she's meant to be doing public duties, actually all about lining her own pocket.
For decades, it was Diana that became the most alarming amount of focus on her. Now, every day, every week,
they're
it's
putting
Meghan.
the focus on themselves. Come on, please, for a single second, can we just bring some perspective to this? We are not writing about them. We're not filming them. They are invading their own privacy.
Why do you not leave her alone? She's not taking our money anymore.
No, but
leave her.
If she does a series where she is at the centre of it with Harry, then she is asking for attention. There's no question about that. Now, what happens then? Dan writes a piece that she doesn't like, and then she says, I don't want that kind of attention. Now, once you're that visible, if you want to go and live in a monastery, that's fine. But if you want to do a Netflix series...
This is what they used to say about Diana, and this is what they used to say.
And Diana courted the press, Yasmin. One of her last phone calls was to Richard Kay, the royal correspondent for the Daily Mail.
I thought you'd learnt your lesson. Leave them alone. Let them do what they're not living in your country anymore. They're not taking your money anymore, our money. Leave them alone.
Is he allowed to review their Netflix show? Under your rules.
Do that.
You're allowed to review it.
So you don't believe that serving members of the British family or who retain their titles, because Yasmin, remember, that's the key point that I've made and Piers Morgan has made it too, and I'm sure you disagree with it. If they were prepared to say we will no longer have our titles, they renounce their titles, that is some...
Welcome, dear viewers, to another episode of our series. Remember to subscribe to our channel to stay tuned for more. Today, we delve into the unending saga of Dan Wootton, the journalist whose obsession with Harry and Meghan has become his signature trait. Ah, yes, Dan Wootton, the man who can't seem to let a day pass without ranting about Harry and Meghan. It's as if the world has stopped spinning and nothing else matters but the actions of these two royals. Despite the wealth of global events deserving attention, Dan has chosen to dedicate his time and energy to a Netflix documentary. Yes, you heard it right, a Netflix documentary. Now let's indulge Wootton's obsession for a moment. Picture this, Harry and Meghan twirling their moustaches in a secret lair, plotting to ruin William and Kate's trip with their documentary. Sounds absurd, doesn't it? But to Dan, this isn't just a mere fantasy. It's an absolute reality. Could it be that Netflix releases content when it makes business sense, and not because of some imaginary royal feud? No, surely not. At least not in Wootton's world. In the grand scheme of things, it's interesting to note that when other royals engage in similar media deals, Wootton is strangely silent. Charles writing books? Not a peep. William and Kate starring in documentaries? Not a word. But when it comes to Harry and Meghan, it's a different story. How dare they? He cries. But let's be real, Dan. It's not what they're doing that bothers you. It's the fact they're doing it on their own terms. So here we are. Another day, another Wootton rant. Is this journalism or is it an obsession? Despite Harry and Meghan leaving the UK years ago, Dan continues to foam at the mouth over every little thing they do. Perhaps it's time for a new hobby, Dan. Gardening, reading, therapy, anything but this fixation. So Dan Wootton is back in the spotlight, not for his journalistic prowess, but for his incessant fixation on Harry and Meghan. But what's even more intriguing is the double standard that seems to pervade. When other members of the royal family engage in media deals, there's an eerie silence from our dear friend Dan. Prince Charles pens a book? Not a murmur. William and Kate feature in a documentary? Not a peep. Yet when Harry and Meghan venture into such territory, the outrage seems to know no bounds. Now, isn't it peculiar that the very same actions, when carried out by different members of the same family, receive such polar opposite reactions? It's as if the rules of the game change when Harry and Meghan step onto the field. They dare to tread their own path, to carve their own roles, and suddenly their every move is scrutinized under a magnifying glass, their every decision is met with a furore. Could it be that the issue here isn't the action but the actors? Could it be that the outrage stems not from what Harry and Meghan are doing, but from the fact that they're doing it independently? That they're stepping out of the shadows and into the spotlight, not as members of an age-old institution, but as individuals? That they're using their platform to tell their own stories, in their own voices, rather than having their narratives shaped by others? It's almost as if there's an unwritten rule that the royals can engage with the media, but only if they play by certain rules, only if they stick to the script, only if they don't rock the boat. But Harry and Meghan, they're not just rocking the boat, they're steering their own ship, and for some reason that seems to ruffle some feathers. So let's call a spade, shall we? The issue here isn't what Harry and Meghan are doing. It isn't that they're engaging with the media or making a Netflix documentary. The issue is that they're doing it on their own terms. They're not asking for permission, they're not seeking approval, they're just living their lives. And for some, that seems to be a hard pill to swallow. Let's delve into another classic Wootton technique, fear-mongering. Now, isn't this a twisted tale of irony? Our dear friend Dan Wootton, a tabloid journalist, is sounding the alarm bells that Netflix might force Harry and Meghan to spill royal secrets. Yes, you heard it right. The man who gets his daily bread and butter from the tabloids, the very institutions that thrive on sensationalism and spilling secrets, is now concerned about the very same thing happening on a different platform. Isn't it amusing how the tables turn? Wootton, who has spent years digging into the private lives of Harry and Meghan, is now suddenly on a moral high horse, claiming that Netflix could possibly compel the couple to reveal intimate details of their royal lives. But isn't that what he's been doing all along? Isn't that the bread and butter of his profession? Let's not forget, this is the same Dan Wootton who has been hounding Harry and Meghan relentlessly, demanding transparency, clamouring for insider information, and feeding the public's insatiable curiosity about the couple's personal life. Yet, now he seems to be having second thoughts. Now he's worried about the couple's privacy. How very convenient. Here's a thought for you, Dan. Isn't it possible that Harry and Meghan, as mature adults, have the ability to decide what they want to share and what they want to keep private? Isn't it possible that they've struck a deal with Netflix that respects their privacy and doesn't force them to reveal anything they're uncomfortable with? But, of course, that wouldn't fit into your narrative, would it, Dan? That wouldn't give you the juicy headlines you so desperately crave. So here we have it, folks. The epitome of irony. A tabloid journalist who makes a living out of prying into people's lives is now worried about the very thing he does for a living happening on another platform. It appears Dan Wootton can't decide whether he wants royal secrets or not. Now, we must ask, is this journalism or an obsession? Let's ponder on this for a moment. Our dear friend Dan Wootton seems to have an unhealthy fixation with every little thing Harry and Meghan do. They've left the UK years ago, yet Dan, like a moth to a flame, cannot resist the allure of their every move. Let's put this into perspective, shall we? Imagine you move to a new city, start a new life, and yet there's this one person who, despite living in your old city, can't seem to let go. They're constantly talking about you, fixated on your every move. It's not simply reporting or interest, it's a relentless obsession. One might argue that Harry and Meghan's status as public figures invites scrutiny. But scrutiny is one thing. What we're witnessing here is something altogether different. It's a relentless pursuit that borders on the voyeuristic. It's as if Dan is trapped in a time warp, unable to move on from the day Harry and Meghan decided to step back from their royal duties and charter their own course. Dan's obsession isn't just concerning, it's perplexing. There are other royals, other news, other events happening in the world, yet he's stuck in this loop, seemingly unable to extricate himself. One has to wonder, what is it about Harry and Meghan that has him so captivated? Is it their independence, their defiance of convention, or is it simply because they've dared to live life on their own terms? And so, we return to our original question. Is this journalism or an obsession? Journalism is about seeking the truth, providing balanced reporting, and serving the public interest. What Dan Wootton is doing seems more akin to a personal vendetta cloaked in the guise of journalism. Perhaps it's high time for Dan Wootton to find a new hobby. Maybe then he could finally break free from this endless cycle of fixation and obsession. After all, there's a whole world out there, brimming with stories waiting to be told. As we conclude this episode, let's take a moment to reflect. We've journeyed through a tale of fixation, irony, and distortions, all intertwined with the spectacle of royal watching. We've seen Dan Wootton's relentless fascination with Harry and Meghan, a fixation that seems to overshadow any other global event. We've explored the blatant double standards that seem to permeate the narrative, the silence that greets the actions of other royals compared with the uproar that ensues when Harry and Meghan dare to step outside the traditional lines. The irony is palpable, isn't it? The same actions, the same ambitions, but met with such different reactions simply because Harry and Meghan choose to carve their own path. We've also delved into the fear-mongering, the baseless predictions of impending doom and scandal, the assumptions that Netflix will somehow force our beloved couple to spill royal secrets. It's interesting to note that the very secrets these critics crave are the ones they fear being revealed. And amidst all this, we've observed the obsession, an obsession that has grown into an entity of its own, living, breathing, thriving on every move Harry and Meghan make. One can't help but wonder if it's time for a new narrative, a new perspective, a new hobby perhaps. What does this all tell us? That it's essential to question, to observe, to not accept narratives at face value. That it's crucial to recognise when personal biases cloud judgment, when obsession replaces objectivity, and when fear-mongering substitutes for factual reporting. So, as we part ways today, let's take these lessons with us. Let's vow to approach every narrative, every story, every piece of news with a critical eye, a questioning mind, and an open heart. Thank you for joining us today. Remember to subscribe for more intriguing discussions. Until next time, keep questioning, keep observing.